Those scholars helped us analyze a fossil at that site. A portion of that fossil is out here at our entrance. It was transported all the way back. It's a huge fossilized Araucaria pine tree. They grow around, but this one is compressed. That means the 20 layers above it were laid down while it was still pliable. That means all 20 of those layers are recent. The whole thing is recent. Well, we analyzed that. That fossil is in 3 stages. Total petrified replacement. Then it has carbonized material, still carbon, but it's in a layer that's assigned an age 140 million years by evolutionary interpretation. Somebody's got a problem. Then some of the bark is still fibrous. Still fibrous. That's amazing. How could that bark? Now, we assigned that to Noah's flood about a little less than 4,500 years ago. Right, David Bassett, a little less than 4,500 years ago. The evolutionary community assigns that 140 million years. Well, how could that bark, some of that bark, remain fibrous even for 4,500 years? It's because it had the capability of secreting fluids that were pest resistant. I'm trying to tell you, the universe sings. It has an incredible dimension to it. Okay, let's get a little more. 1 Chronicles 16:33 reveals that the trees of the wood sing out at the presence of the Lord. Isaiah 44:23 states, "Sing, O ye heavens, shout, ye lower parts of the earth," and the lower parts of the earth are vibrating because they're moderating in radioactive elements that give off a specific frequency. So they're singing. Ye mountains and the forest and every tree therein, so the trees do sing. It is apparent that God sees His creation as a musical composition where even the smallest particles are vibrating and resounding in lovely music that God can hear and enjoy. Now science has found we can hear them along with Him. To me, this is very, very exciting. Music of the spheres. Physicist Robert Whitelaw, who wrote the foreword to one of my early books about creation and symphony, physicist Robert Whitelaw wrote an extensive technical description of this musical phenomenon in The Waltz of the Planets, titled Harmony in the Heavens. In doing so, Professor Whitelaw demonstrated that the spherical Earth, here it is right there, spherical Earth is an integral part of the harmonic scale and stability designed in the structure of the solar system and the universe. Okay, we get to the heart of what I wanted to tell you. There is a movement underfoot, an actual movement. I was surprised. All the primary creation entities are making statements about it. The Earth is spherical. It is not flat. We're going to go into the reasons it was assumed to be flat by certain researchers a century and a half ago. Credentialed astronomer Danny Faulkner, PhD, informs us regarding the controversy about a spherical Earth and a flat Earth is the Earth flat? He gives compelling reasons why we know the Earth is spherical. I could have quoted various scholars, but he had a very succinct article, and I am giving him full credit appropriately. And as long as the citation is given, then that is legal and proper to do. Here we have an actual photograph, a NASA photograph, showing the curvature of the Earth and showing some of the atmospheric response as well. How do we know the Earth is spherical? How do we know it's not a flat Earth? These individuals espousing a flat Earth assume it to be like a pancake or a disc that is spinning, but it is also going through space, and above it in an arc the sun is spinning, and the planets are spinning around us and the sun in a complicated configuration that will not work with gravitational physics and will not work by observation. But rather than our just saying, oh, that's a bunch of bunk, good people have been caught up in this. So I want to show you scientifically and biblically why we're sure the earth is spherical. And Danny Faulkner is one of our very fine research specialists, not ours, but he works with AIG. A, Earth's shadow on the moon demonstrates it's spherical. See that shadow? That's an arc. The question of the Earth's true shape has been settled 2 millennia, 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years before Columbus, that is, 2,500 years ago. The earliest recorded discussion of a spherical Earth is from Pythagoras in the 6th century BC. Pythagoras correctly understood that the cause of lunar eclipses is the shadow of the Earth falling on the moon. And that, of course, is oval. So let's continue. This can happen only when the moon is opposite the sun in our sky, which coincides with full moon. The Earth's shadow is larger than the moon, so we cannot see the entire shadow at once. However, during a lunar eclipse, we see the Earth's shadow creep across the moon. So there, it's creeping and creeping and creeping and creeping and creeping, and the arc changes because the Earth's shadow is larger than this. Because the edge of the Earth's shadow always is a portion of the circle. I want to make sure we get this. This is going up. It's always a portion of the circle. The Earth's shadow must be a circle since we see the portion. Here we have the composite of the series, and when you put it together, only that portion was seen, that portion, that, but you put it all together, and it's very obvious that it is a circle. If the Earth were flat and round, watch, similar to a disk, it could cast a circular shadow. It could. But only for lunar eclipses that occur at midnight. Only. For a lunar eclipse at or near sunrise or at or near sunset, the Earth's shadow would be an ellipse. You'd see it from the side. A line or a rectangle, depending on how thick the disk was compared to its diameter. You'd see it from the side, but we never see it from the side, meaning that no matter where you see the Earth's shadow eclipsing the moon, no matter where you see it, it is oval. That means the Earth has to be a sphere. The Earth's shadow during a lunar eclipse is always a circle. Portion of the circle, the rest of it going like that, regardless of the time of night when the eclipse occurs. The only shape that consistently has a circular shadow, regardless of its orientation, is a sphere. Another argument involves the stars that are visible in the northern and southern parts of the sky. The North Star, here we go, Polaris. The North Star lies within a degree, very close, of the North Celestial Pole, the direction in space that Earth's rotation points. It's Polaris, the North Star. As the Earth rotates each day, the stars, the sun, and the moon appear to spin around the North Celestial Pole, so the North Celestial Pole remains fixed in the sky. Since the North Star is so close to the North Celestial Pole, we can approximate the altitude of the North Celestial Pole with the North Star's altitude. So here, the Earth is rotating the North Celestial Pole. Constellations that are always visible, north and south constellations never visible. If the Earth were flat, you could see all the same stars all the time. But that's not the case. And here's a figure. There's Polaris, and that's a time lapse of the stars circling around. We're actually circling, so they appear to be circling, but we're moving. So here's how you can determine where the North Star Polaris is. The Big Dipper, the ladle of the Big Dipper points directly to the North Star, and that points toward Cassiopeia. The altitude of the North Star is noticeably higher in the sky at northern locations than it is at southern locations. For example, the North Star is much higher in the sky in the northern United States and Canada than it is in Florida, as anyone who pays attention on a trip, such as a vacation, can attest. This can happen only if north-south motion is along an arc. Got that? So from the north and south, we know the Earth has an arc, is not flat, north-south. But let's not stop there. Curvature of the Earth. Not only is the Earth curved in the north-south direction, it also is curved in the east-west direction. The sun rises and sets approximately 3 hours earlier on the east coast than it does on the west coast. This shows that the Earth is curved in the east-west direction. If the Earth is curved in both the north-south and east-west direction, the most likely shape of the Earth is a sphere. That's the only thing you can come up with. If the Earth were flat, there could be no multiple time zones. The sun's supposed to be orbiting up there, according to that idea, spinning around with everything observed. If the Earth were flat, there could not be multiple time zones, where it is either day or night somewhere on the 24-hour rotational period of the Earth. It's either day or night. No time increments. E, ancient sources. Ancient sources such as Aristotle also mention that the hulls of ships disappeared. There's the hull of the ship, but that hull is gone. The hull of ships disappeared before their masts, there's the mast, did, as ships sail away. This would happen only if the Earth is spherical, if there were curvature to the surface. If one is perched atop the mast of a ship, one can spot land or other ships before people on the deck can. This is why spotters often were placed in a crow's nest higher above a ship's deck. If the Earth were flat, there would be no advantage to being on the deck. A similar thing can be observed on land. It is possible only if the Earth is spherical. Okay, now here's a contribution from David Bassett, Associate David Bassett. Associate, no salary, just a title. Right, David? But a good title. Okay, so these are contributions. Plato, classical Greek philosopher, 5th and 4th century BC, in Timaeus wrote, "The Creator God, the deity, made the world in the form of a globe, round as from a lathe, having its extremes in every direction equidistant from the center." That's a sphere. "The most perfect and most like itself of all figures. For he considered that the like is infinitely fairer than the unlike." Smart guy. The Venerable Bede, English Roman Catholic monk, 8th century AD, wrote, "We call the earth a globe because if all things are included in the outline, the earth's circumference will represent the figure of a perfect globe, and not circular by a shield, but rather like a ball, and it extends from its center with perfect roundness on all sides." Well, it actually bulges, but he's right in principle, but it bulges only slightly. Thomas Aquinas, Italian Catholic priest and medieval philosopher, wrote, "The physicist proves the earth is round by one means, the astronomer by another. For the latter proves this by mathematics, that is, by the shapes of ellipses, or something of that sort, while the former proves it by means of physics, that is, by the movement of heavenly bodies toward the center, and so forth." And they recognized that it was a sphere. Not only did ancient people know that the earth was spherical, one of them, now, a smart guy, one of them accurately measured the size of the earth around 200 BC. Eratosthenes worked at the great library in Alexandria, Egypt, that was destroyed by the Islamists, unfortunately. One particular year, on the summer solstice, Eratosthenes was in southern Egypt near modern-day Aswan. Being on the northern limit of the tropics, the sun was directly overhead at noon on the summer solstice. Eratosthenes realized this because he could look down into a deep well and see the bottom. Mark got us a deep well, and you can see the water, see the bottom. But he couldn't see the bottom in clear sunlight where he lived in northern Egypt. That guy put things together. Normally, the bottom of a well is not visible because the sun's light does not shine directly on the bottom. He sees a shadow. But it did at noon on the summer solstice because the sun was directly overhead. The sun never was directly overhead in Alexandria because it was not in the tropics. And there's the lighthouse of that very famous city of Alexandria. Major enterprise. Back in Alexandria the following year, Eratosthenes brilliantly measured the altitude of the sun at noon on the summer solstice. How did he do this? He did this by constructing a vertical pole, there and there, of known height and measuring the pole's shadow at noon. There's the shadow. There's the shadow at noon. Trigonometry allowed Eratosthenes to compute the sun's altitude. Now, knowing that, the difference between 90 degrees, straight up, and the altitude was how far the sun was from being vertical. Eratosthenes found that the angle was about 1/5 of a circle. This meant that Alexandria and Aswan were separated by 1/5 of the Earth's circumference. 1/50th. Hey, good, NASA. 1/50th of the Earth's circumference. Eratosthenes knew the distance between these two locations, so multiplying the distance by 50 gave him the Earth's circumference, and he was right to within 2 degrees. How many of you could have done that? Now, support for a flat earth. Where on earth do people get this idea? I mean, smart people get the idea. Honest people, some of them outright atheists and evolutionists, some of them well-intentioned Christians and creationists. How do they get the idea the earth is flat? A very fine engineer sat with me a couple of years ago, and he said, you know, I read about this experiment. And he said, I'm an engineer. And he said, the earth is flat. I said, I'm going to look into this. Okay, so we're looking into it. Support for a flat earth. The Bedford level experiment, and that's what he referred to, the engineer referred to, was a direct attempt to show that the earth is flat. In 1838, Samuel Barley Rowbotham claimed to have conducted an experiment on the old Bedford River at the Bedford level near Norfolk, England. Now, I was interested in this. I wanted to know what their thinking was. The Bedford level is a 6-mile stretch of the old Bedford River that is straight, allowing an uninterrupted view along the 6 miles. Furthermore, there's no gradient there, so the portion of the river amounts to a slow-flowing drainage canal. Got that? We need to know how they came up with this. Watch. If the earth is curved, then the drop from one end of the other is about 24 feet. So here is Rowbotham looking through a telescope, and the drop, if the earth is curved, the drop is about 24 feet. That is, if one were to use a telescope at water level to view along the water on one end of the Bedford level, a mass 24 feet high on the other end would not be visible. Okay. Rowbotham waded into the river and used a telescope held 8 inches above the water. Now that's where he got into trouble. First of all, you lose good telescopes doing that, even on flat surfaces. Watch, 8 inches above the water to observe a rowboat with a 5-foot-high mast rowing away. Rowbotham claimed that he could see the mast when it was 6 miles away. Wow. Even though the spherical Earth required that the top of the mast be about 11 feet below his horizon as viewed from 8 inches above the water. Rowbotham concluded that the Earth must be flat at least to his satisfaction. Rowbotham, using a pseudonym, published his results in a pamphlet titled Zetetic Astronomy in 1849, which he expanded into a book in 1865. So he proved the Earth was flat, and quite a few hundred people read the pamphlet and said, well, it is. Science has demonstrated that. And Rowbotham was a pretty smart guy. He was an inventor, invented some pretty impressive apparatus. Well, most people ignored Rowbotham's work. However, in 1870, John Hampden, another flat Earth proponent, offered a wager of a hefty sum to anyone who could demonstrate a convex curvature of a large body of water, as a spherical Earth would require. The famous Alfred Russel Wallace took the challenge. Now, Alfred Russel Wallace came up with a theory of evolution quite parallel to Darwin's theory of evolution, except that Wallace mandated this is the way God brought all of the life forms to view, and demanded absolute atheism. It doesn't require a God. So that was the difference between the two. And Darwin gets the credit because it is atheistic, and Russell is just a footnote. But he was quite an individual, quite an enterprising individual. Okay, so he took the challenge, apparently unaware of Rowbotham's result. Wallace altered the technique a bit. He placed 2 identical objects. Now, here's a picture of that river, the Bedford Level River. Wow, pretty even in early spring. Wish we had some leaves on that, but it's straight for 6 miles and it's just as level as it can get. It's just slow drainage. He placed 2 identical objects at different locations, one here, or one here, and one there, along the Bedford Level. Wallace examined either object from a telescope mounted on a bridge. He found that the nearer object appeared higher than the more distant one. Well, now from that bridge, if anything, this had to be important because the one closer to you from the angle would be lower even though it was level. But here the one closer appeared to be higher, and that for this experiment was extremely important. He found that the nearer object appeared higher than the more distant one, consistent with the results predicted by a spherical Earth. Why the difference? The density of air decreases with increasing height. The fog lies close to the river. As you go higher, everybody still awake? Hope I'm not losing you. And in the audience on the web, I hope I'm not losing you because this is vitally important. The higher you go, the less dense is the air. That dense air refracts the sight, the sunlight, the rays, interpreting the object. You see, the object gives off the radiation from the sun, bounces it. Okay, why the difference? The density of air decreases with increasing height, the higher you get, because this causes a slight change in the index of refraction in the air. Rays of light passing close to the Earth's surface are bent downward. If it's close to the Earth's surface, those rays of light are bent, and numerous experiments demonstrate this. This makes distant objects appear higher than they actually are. Watch. Incidentally, this well understood effect causes the sun to appear to rise about 2 minutes earlier than it actually does. Did you know that? It's because of the refraction of the light is bent. So the sun's not quite rising, but we see it rising. Well, sure, it's rising. No, you see it is rising. 2 minutes later, it actually is. So there's the eye. Here an object appears higher because of the bending of the rays. Even the sun itself, the biggest object in our solar system, appears higher because of the bending of these rays. And if it would happen there, it would happen to smaller objects. A temperature inversion, where the temperature increases with height, is common at low heights along the Bedford level and other bodies of water. Temperature inversions accentuate the refraction. If the rate of increase of air temperature with height is great enough, a temperature inversion can even cause objects in the distance to appear above the horizon, just like this. They're really there, but they appear up there. And we know why they do. That refraction. In 1896, Ulysses Grant Morrow conducted a similar experiment on the old Illinois drainage canal under these conditions and found results consistent with the Earth being curved like that. Apparently, Wallace was aware of these effects while Robotham was not. This is what prompted Wallace to conduct his experiment high enough above the water to eliminate the major contribution of refraction due to a temperature inversion at low height. When those extreme experiments are properly conducted to minimize the effect of refraction, they're consistent with a spherical Earth. The Flat Earth Society is an active organization currently led by a Virginian man named Daniel Shenton. He's been the organization's president since 2004. Though Shenton believes in evolution and global warming, he and his hundreds, if not thousands of followers worldwide also believe that the Earth is a disk that you can fall off of. Magellan, Drake, and Darwin. History records that the expeditions of Ferdinand Magellan, 1480 to 1521 was his lifespan, and Sir Francis Drake, 1540 to 1596, circumnavigated the globe, as did the HMS Beagle with the young Charles Darwin aboard as the gentleman companion of Captain Robert Fitzroy. Airliners now do this on a regular basis. Members of our CEM team have actually flown around the globe. We had one team that flew in one direction simultaneously. The rest of us flew in another direction. We met in Tel Aviv, Israel. Each followed the curvature. The Earth is spherical. Okay, circumnavigation demonstrates that. They did it by ship, we did it by plane. Astronauts in space. The International Space Station has now gone around the Earth over 100,000 times, carrying with it more than 220 different astronauts. One astronaut, Colonel Jeff Williams, has recently returned from his 4th trip to space. Colonel Williams set the record for cumulative days in space, 534, and he is also an outspoken Christian. He and other astronauts have taken thousands of pictures and hundreds of hours of videos of the Earth from space, many of which are available online. You can look it up yourself. They all verify that the Earth is spherical. But one thing that the flat earthers say is, well, all of that's faked. They've got a reason to do that. All of it's faked. Well, now, wait a minute. You got 220 different astronauts. 100,000 trips. Pretty hard to fake all of that. The Coriolis effect, very important in this consideration. Speaking of rotation, in tropical cyclones or hurricanes, the powerful winds blow anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere where we are, and clockwise in the southern hemisphere where Fiji is, because of the Coriolis effect on a sphere. They would rotate in the same direction if the Earth were a spinning flat disk. You wouldn't have that effect if it were a spinning flat disk. Gravity pulls. David Bassett called our attention to this. There he is. All the other planets and moons are spherical. Over time, any body of this size in space would form a sphere by gravitational attraction. You start out with a pancake, and that thing is going to pull and pull and pull as it rotates in space. And ultimately, you're going to end up with a big ball. Apparent retrograde motion of planets. We added this at the last minute. Thanks to Mark for his excellent work and just staying with us till it's done. What is retrograde motion? This is very important. By Christopher Crockett in Space magazine publication. Sometimes the planets appear to change direction in the sky. I mean, you've got Jupiter going here, and he stops, turns around, and for 40 days goes back. He stops again, and then heads back and says, that's really the way I intended to go. That happens every year. It happens with some of the other planets as well. That's absolutely awesome. That's retrograde motion. Okay, planets, sometimes the planets appear to change direction in the sky. This retrograde motion is entirely an illusion caused by the Earth passing the slower moving outer planets. Sometimes the planets seem to move backward. Watch. And Mark helped us to illustrate this quite well. Typically, the planets shift slightly eastward from night to night. They're going eastward, night to night, drifting slowly against the backdrop of the stars. From time to time, however, they change direction. For a few months, they'll head west before turning back around and resuming their easterly course. This is retrograde motion. Though it baffled ancient astronomers, we know now that retrograde planets are an illusion caused by the motion of Earth passing the outer planets in their orbits. And we'll illustrate that just briefly, and we'll see what's going on. You can test this the next time you pass a car on the highway. If you're a passenger, test it. If you're the driver, keep your eyes on the road. As you approach the slower car, it's clearly moving in the same direction you are. Right as you pull alongside and pass it, however, the car appears to move backward for just a moment. As you continue pulling away, the car resumes its forward motion. It didn't move backward. It was your relative position, and you saw it in relation to the background. You still awake? The background, the trees and the houses, your mind calculated, you saw it, you were passing it, and it appeared to go backward. It wasn't going backward. It was just going slower than you were. A split second later, you adjust to the background, you glance in the mirror, and the thing is going forward. It's not going backward. Okay. This is illustrated. The same thing happens as Earth passes the slower moving planets. We're faster because we're closer to the sun. The sun's here. Apparent retrograde motion of Jupiter through Taurus. Taurus in the background. Here's Jupiter. So here we go. July 2012. It was moving like this. October 2012. It was still moving like that, but slower. It stopped December 2012. Well, it didn't stop. It was still moving. But like the car you're passing, it appeared to stop because we're closer, we're moving faster. Here, February 2013, the thing's actually going backward. It's not going backward, it's still moving. We're just moving faster than it is. May 2013, it's way behind. Wow. Same thing happens as Earth passes slower moving outer planets. When we pass Jupiter, for example, the gas giant appears to reverse course in the sky for a couple of months, about 40 days. A schematic of how retrograde motion works with the Earth. T passes an outer planet, P as they both orbit the sun, S the changing viewing angle from the Earth makes the projection of the planet against the celestial sphere move backward. as we pass the solar planet, credit from Rhesus. And there it is. There's the sun, there we are. So it appears to turn around and move backward. Same thing as the other schematic. But retrograde movement isn't always an illusion. There are real retrograde motions in the solar system. Venus rotates in the opposite direction from every other planet. Wow. And that too is a problem for evolutionary astronomy. Apparent retrograde motion refers to the occasional backward motion of the planets. It is entirely an illusion caused by the moving Earth passing the outer planets in their orbits. This apparent retrograde motion is only possible if Earth is a sphere orbiting the sun. David Lyons contributed this entire section. He's a ham operator. Sometime he hams it up. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, but I'm federally licensed to ham.
He is federally licensed to ham it up. Okay. Ham radio, evidence for a spherical Earth, researched by technical writer David Lyons, and he writes for major technical companies. Many people who believe that the Earth is flat simply dismiss any evidence from spaceflight, believing it to be a fake. There is, however, one way to test whether the Earth is flat or spherical by using amateur ham radio. As high frequency HF, 1.8 megahertz to 30 megahertz, radio waves travel out and up from the transmitter, they tend to be refracted or reflected back downward to the Earth's surface multiple times and can thus be heard around the world. Let's see if the schematic, there we are. Here's the transmitter, and they're reflected and reflected back multiple times and can thus be heard around the world. This might not be convincing, except that the stations at moderate distances from the horizon, these right here, fall beyond the horizon fall of the skip zone and do not hear the signal. They don't hear the signal. That is incredibly important. This could be a problem during emergencies. To overcome this effect, special antennas can be set up to shoot the HF signal nearly straight up so it bounces straight back, providing reliable communications to points a few hundred miles away, beyond the radio horizon, but inside the skip zone. This is useful for emergencies such as earthquakes or severe weather where the normal communication infrastructure is destroyed. Now watch. A flat Earth would have no pronounced skip zone like hams have to work around. If the Earth were flat, long-range, low-power communications would be possible at very high frequencies, coast to coast. Here you have the transmitter. If it's flat, you just go right on across from one side of the disk to the other. No problem. It's the sphericity that creates the problem. Very high frequency radio waves, 144 megahertz to 148 megahertz, penetrates the ionosphere. They're slightly bent as they travel over the terrain, but eventually just shoot out into space. How do we do this? One tip-off is that very large antennas with very high, expensive amplifiers cannot send a signal more than about 300 miles. Wow. Modest equipment can make contact several hundred miles away from mountaintops, allowing the signal to travel farther before it is shadowed back to the ground. Another clue is that one can aim a good antenna at the moon and bounce the signal off its surface to be received anywhere on Earth where the moon is visible, even at vast distances. This is called Moon-Earth Communications, EME, or moon bounce. Again, if the Earth is flat, moon bounce would not work better than pointing any antenna at the continent you want to talk to. So this confirms the sphericity. VFH frequencies are very useful for surface communication, but are limited by the curvature of the Earth. VHF can bend around the Earth slightly, and certain weather phenomena can create occasional long-distance ducting. However, tall antennas and very high power are required to reach over 100 miles. The International Space Station is always 260 miles away, yet can be contacted using a 5-watt power from a quality walkie-talkie portable receiver. So all of this confirms there's curvature to the earth. VHF walkie-talkies are familiar. Police radios are essentially the same thing, only slightly different frequencies. These can communicate over a few miles or 20 to 30 miles to a station with a tall tower. But this same small radio can talk to astronauts in the international space 260 miles away. If the Earth were flat, we could expect the same range on Earth. Cell phones would work flawlessly, except for the growing number of software bugs. Scientific statements in Scripture. The Bible settled it all along. Isaiah 40:22 reveals that it is He that sitteth upon the circle of the earth. Now, did you get that? This engineer sitting with me said, well, yeah, God looks down and the earth is like a flat pancake, so it's a circle. But now, wait a minute. God doesn't sit in one place. Wherever God looks at the earth, it's a circle. That can only be possible if it's a sphere. From any direction, it's a sphere, circle. That is, from any direction, the omnipotent Creator views the earth. It's a circle, a spherical body in space. Testimony of Jesus, the Creator Himself. Jesus, the Creator, clearly spoke of Earth's spherical shape, referring to His second coming, which will be in an instant, just like that. He said, I tell you that in that night there will be two in one bed. One will be taken and the other left. There will be two women grinding together. One will be taken and the other left. Luke 17:34 and 35. That is, in one place. It would be night with people in bed, while in another place at the same time it would be during the morning when women grind corn. It has to be spherical. And in the parallel passage, Matthew 24:40, there is allusion to a still different time zone, the main part of the day. Then two men will be in the field. One will be taken, the other left. So it has to be spherical. Conclusion. The earth in harmony with the sun, moon, planets, stars, and all creation joins in resonating harmonies of praise to the Creator. We blend our voices in the triumphant song. All hail the power of Jesus' name. Let angels prostrate fall. Bring forth the royal diadem and crown Him Lord of all. His creation is majestic.